Yeah, grants are interesting, right?
Yes. Especially here in Canada.
Yeah. I mean, there are some obvious things that we don't want grants to do.
Yes.
We don't want grants to directly fund things that will otherwise be done.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's not a very hard
really? You
principle.
don't say?
But every time, so there is a thing, and this is where, while I'm coming from the left side, I'll agree with your libertarian instincts on the political process. When it comes to funding innovation, the political process demands wins too early. And so what you have is you have politicians, and they want to fund stuff, but they also need to have, during the time of their election cycle, a win from it.
Yes.
Well, what are you going to do? If you want to win, you don't want to take a risk.
No.
You want to, for instance, fund something that already looks like it's a success.
Exactly. Yeah.
You want to fund something that isn't isn't going to look like it was a big failure. But we know that with regard to innovation or innovative things, that's not what you want. So there was always this discussion in the US where they funded some solar company and then lost a whole lot of money on it, whatever, because solar is difficult when it gets picked up. And of course, the punishment for losing all that money was huge political things. And I'm not saying that, there should have been no punishment for failure, but you have to understand that it's just like, if you are going to do things innovative, you're going to have failures. So, one thing we've done at CDL recently is we opened up a space stream.
A space stream, okay.
Space stream. It's led by Chris Hadfield.
Okay, yeah.
Why not?
Why not, of course.
Well, it's not actually just that he's a public figure. There is something about somebody who has commanded the International Space Station that makes them a very clear thinker. Know what to do. They know the decisiveness, the questions
There's no room
to
for
ask.
mistake.
None. It's no tolerance. Quite impressive thing. But he also has domain expertise in this area. Canada doesn't have a space program.
We don't anymore at all.
No. None of those sorts of things. It's nothing like geographically we're not in the right place in the world to launch rockets. Why set up a space program in Canada? Well, one is because we were CDL and no one else was doing it. But two is that it's a thesis. All of a sudden, we've had, thanks to SpaceX and other things, a massive drop occurring in the cost of accessing space.
Astronomically.
And it's going to keep going down to some huge degree. And so now we're not there yet, but now we are, if we continue on that trajectory, we'll be at a point where there will be the ability for people to think of a business that requires access to space and do it. And that's what the space stream is. Now, here's the difficult part about that is half of these things are like, if you do a thought experiment and say, if I had very cheap access to space, what could I do? And think of lots of ideas that are almost no-brainers. The problem is that rate of decrease.
Yes.
We still don't know what it is. We don't know what the access is. We don't know what all sorts of stuff could happen in the meantime. We're one SpaceX crash away from things slowing down, etc. So it's very, very risky. But we open that up because the idea is like you have to sort of start at some point. And the expectation is that most of these companies will be failing. And they'll be failing for things like timing issues, as much as execution and other things we want to lump it in together. Yet, imagine if, and so it's going to be hard to get capital for those startups.
Yeah.
We're already off to the races.
Yeah.
Hard to get capital for those startups for good, solid reasons.
Yeah.
However, let's imagine that the government decided to put up capital for that and said, we're going to have space expertise in Canada. It's going to benefit country with very remote areas and other things like that. So just on a global scale, that's good. People, when they talk about going to the moon and the asteroid belt, what are they talking about? Mining.
Yes.
Mining. that seems familiar.
Mm-hmm.
We have expertise there as well. And so you can see that you could align some stuff. You could have a vision, but it can't be a vision that says we're going to have stuff in orbit, we're going to have stuff on the moon, blah, blah, blah.
This is where I agree with you, where government funding does benefit.
Yeah.
Because no private individual is just going to give $100 million. You can't.
And most of these big innovations that sort of push things along, there's some sort of government seeding, sometimes by accident. But, like something spitting out of a Department of Defense or whatever, bits of the iPhone.
Yeah, I think it's good to have, you come to a point where at least R&D's done, then it can go to commercialization.
Right.
But also, I've thought about this before. I don't know if anyone's done it. Maybe Canada can be the first, where it's like, we'll use CDL space program, for example.
Yeah.
Ontario just had a $100 million tech cluster fund. Let's say we have a $100 million space program fund goes into here. And then we're tracking, it's a think tank.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Let's bring in the brains.
Yeah.
We're going to make stuff. Okay. The money that the government gave us comes from taxpayers.
Right.
Directly.
Yes.
Right. Businesses and income tax, wherever the streams. But anyways, it's tax dollars to this fund. This is where I see an opportunity of, you're familiar with UBI. I know you've, Universal Basic Income. So my buddy Floyd, he's leading like UBI Works in Toronto. I've always said, okay, I'm a firm believer in a UBI dividend fund as opposed to just like...
Right.
And
this
so,
is like they have in Alaska and in Norway. And,
yeah, exactly, right? Or Kuwait with the oil funds for everybody. Where let's say the space program with the $100 million goes and we discover something.
Right.
It's government funded. We start using it, makes a profit.
Right.
Theoretically, us as a taxpayers should get some dividend from that.
It's a way to do it. I mean, I don't know how it would
align in that way.
No, they're great. I mean, obviously with mining, so this is where we sort of have historical problems. Is it's in mining, most of the stuff. Think about what it takes to get rich from a mine. You have to discover something.
Mm-hmm.
You then have to pull it out and sell it.
Exactly. Yeah.
But the fact that it's there already is an endowment from the land. So if I give you just randomly allocated mining rights over a certain thing, that's like a gift to you.
Yes.
Yes, you have to do some work still to get it out there. And we want you to do work, so you should have some upside.
Mm-hmm.
But you shouldn't necessarily get the whole friggin' lot. A few years ago, Australia actually decided to pass a resource rent tax, basically to tax mining, basically, and then distribute it. Mm-hmm. It was a way of getting income. And of course, the mining companies push massively back.
Yeah, with the lobbyists.
Funding and things like that. But it's the kind of thing that we have in mind. In other words, if something is there and it's obviously pure luck, we should have a stake in it. But the same is on these moonshots. I agree with you. Now, how you do it, because you've got to be careful. You don't want to stifle the extra innovation that needs to occur. Mm-hmm. So you have to find some way of measuring. With mining, it's easy to work out a way. It's like, there's enough certainty there where you can do the calculations and work it out. With space would be a little bit harder, but not impossible. It's not impossible. There would be ways of which you could set up a sort of corporation or an entity that could hold.
It could be no different than you and I doing a startup and we hold 10% equity for employees.
Yeah.
So we have 10% equity of whatever, 90% you can do whatever. I'm already, the reason you even exist, because I'm putting my labor in X.
Yeah.
I'm paying tax from this random labor.
Right.
And the only reason you have this is because of my labor.
Right.
It's a different story when it's privately funded. Do whatever the hell you want. I don't care.
Right.
Go spend it all, burn it all. I don't care. Make $1 trillion.
But if you're going to have a government seat, and this happens with other things like you might be quantum computing or some of these other things that are long payoffs that might be required. There may be entities that way. I admit there's attractiveness to it. The only thing is you don't want to stuff that up.
No.
Because again, you've got this other side, you've got the permissionless innovation.
Yes.
For instance, Creative Destruction Lab, for all of its success, it's kind of unique in another way. We don't put money in, although we have some streams that have some money available, but it's private. And people sort of talk about, well, we've got costs. Shouldn't we be raising it? Shouldn't it? And so people, whenever we think about funding the costs of a thing like CDL, people come and say, oh, well, you should be taking a stake in these companies. That's how you should get around this. And I look at that and and Y Combinator does that and stuff like
7%
that.
7% for everyone, something like that, yeah.
And they do stuff, and people make that trade-off. But I look at us doing it, and I'm like, then when we're getting people who are applying for it, they've got to sit there in the calculation in their mind.
Yes.
We're going to be sitting on their friggin' cap table forever.
Yes.
So the difference between that and a mining royalty is not like it's a share of corporation. A mining royalty is if you pull this ton of ore out, you pay this amount.
Yes.
If we could work out the same thing, the same measurable, plannable instrument, then it becomes like it's still permissionless, but I know what the cost is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's what you kind of want to come up with. I don't know what the solution would be for space. I don't think we're at that yet, and I don't think anyone's proposing putting in the Canadian Space Agency or whatever it's going to be yet. It'd be nice if they did, but we could think about that. But yeah, so we have to think of something measurable. So you don't want to have something. You don't want to harm permission. You don't want to create a problem.
Yes. And
cap table mess ups, startups it's a costly piece of crap that these founders
get into. It's not my idea. It's been done before. I think some areas in New York. What was his name? I forget his name. One of the original angel investors in the States. Anyways, it's how do we stimulate more? Because when people talk about startups, they talk about, for example, the FANG companies.
Right.
Or they look at the Silicon Valley companies. I tell people that's a 0.01%.
Yeah.
They're the outliers of outliers, right? You look at the medium of a successful entrepreneur, a male, this is stats, male, mid-40s.
Right.
$3 million to $10 million.
Yes.
That's the normal entrepreneur.
Hopeful.
Hopeful, yeah. Maybe has a team of 15, 20, Okay. So we look at Toronto. Then we look at, and this can be applied anywhere actually, and we look at surrounding cities in Ontario. What would be interesting is having a grant-like system, and this goes to what Amazon got. So I'm kind of repeating what Amazon, but for like me starting off.
Yeah.
Like, can you give me tax-free or maybe like rent-free or something of incentive to have my operations here?
Yeah.
I'm starting out. I'm hiring local. I'm getting people here. I'm not I'm not an Amazon. I'm not a Google.
So they do those sorts of things. They have those sorts of things available. They're often contingent on hiring enough people and stuff like that, trying to create jobs. So that does exist. I think there's a tendency to focus on that as the sort of constraint. I don't know if space and other things, rent and other things are the real constraints. I think that's just like this. There are options around.
Yeah.
For us, it was, the constraint was the bigger thing that was, what Silicon Valley had that Toronto didn't have was people around who are able to provide
the network
advice. Yeah. It's not just a network. It's like just being able to, it's experience and expertise. And so, if you have a place like Canada that hasn't had as many startups go to scale, that means there are fewer entrepreneurs and off we are. And so you want to make sure you can sort of attract that. And so the miracle of what CDL currently has, it's like an ecosystem in a room. Brings together all these people every 2 months.
I've been to a couple of them. They're fantastic.
But that in terms of, remember I said that, from between idea and getting some money to it, there are all these steps.
Mm-hmm.
The more you can push down and de-risk each one, the better it is. Much better than a break off the rent.
Yeah.
Much more valuable. If I can save you 3 years of mucking around, that's much more valuable than any tax break on rent that I could give. And so I think those sorts of things are what we want to encourage. I mean, I think, what has surprised us is like when we started out CDL, it was like, I think the first cohort was 20 companies. And people thought, wow, 20 companies, that's how are you going to do that? And now we're up to hundreds a year. Where the hell did they all come from? The answer was they were always there.
Always there, yeah.
They were just latent.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's just a Toronto thing, because we've been plopping these all over. We've got in Halifax. I
heard they're doing awesome stuff over
25 companies a year in Halifax. It's a small place. That's a small place, but it has some entrepreneurs there and has some others who have stayed there. And Calgary is the same thing happening. And imagine forget just Canada, just popped around the world. How many of those sorts of things are? So the challenge is not to create a Silicon Valley. The challenge is to get that same ingredients unlocked in all the places.
Yes. Now, the thing with like Silicon Valley for me is, you look at like the venture capitalist model. The model is very simple. It's like we double down, we want unicorns,
Right.
so we want asymmetrical returns.
Yeah.
Right. We want 1,000% returns.
Yes.
We look at the statistics right now, less and less companies are going public.
Right.
We look at, for example, what's that big fund?
SoftBank.
So they're going to outcompete me by just ridiculously valuating startups. So here's $100 million, like WeWork fiasco.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's like, I personally see the writing on the wall.
Right.
To me, it was like pretty much a Ponzi scheme. When I first got a long time to the VC, I'm like, wait a second. Like, why is your company worth $30 million? Am I like the schmuck in the room? Am I missing some data points? Like you have zero profit.
Right.
Is this like reverse entrepreneurship? Profits don't matter, So I kind of see the writing on the wall with this type of.
People. I don't know whether there's a bubble in this stuff. What it seems to me, there's a few things. One is, I think, and it's related to inequality. There are a lot of extremely wealthy people, so there's a lot of stuff sloshing about, and that's where they end up in the soft banks and in these firms. Like, we'll allocate some of our capital to these more highly risk stuff. So I think that's going to fuel stuff.
Yeah.
Now, the part of that's good. I mean, you shouldn't want to then throw it away and things like that. I mean, I
wouldn't throw it away. Like, okay, so I'm not going to name names. They do their job. Some do great, some do poorly. You look at, for example, companies go public. At that point, all the value has kind of been extracted by the time it hits, whether it's an RTO or an IPO.
Right.
And let's say retail investors, hopefully they eliminate the accredited investor. That whole thing is another way of creating inequality.
Right, although you've got to be careful because the rationale for that is that people... It's
but they can
seed funding
but they can go gamble.
It's gambling, but they can go. The beautiful thing about gambling, one is it's regulated, to some degree, and two is at least you know the odds. I'm not saying anybody gambles and necessarily knows all that stuff, but this other stuff is gambling. I mean, we had this problem with cryptocurrency as well. So you've got to be a little bit careful.
Well, they have like the Jobs Act where you can do up to $25,000. Right, just kind of erroneous paperwork. I think if they streamline that a little bit better.
I mean, we've got these funds like AngelList and other things like that. I mean, we could open it up to people.
So what I'm trying to get at though is, let's say you and I have a startup. We raise $5 million, Series A.
Right.
We're doing okay. We're not profitable. We raise a Series B, and we're profitable, whatever the margin is. I think having an option of going faster, something similar to even how Spotify did the Sideways IPO, like price discovery, but more or less, like I said, before they went public, the value was extracted.
Right.
How can we, and when I'm looking at the stats, because less and less companies are opening up the books, the valuations are ridiculous. It's like, we're valued $100 billion privately. So you have to be valued almost $1 trillion, to go public? You know what I mean?
It's crazy.
And this is where like security tokens are interesting in the future, not currently right now. It's way, way, way too early. But how do we create systems where we can get more companies, whether it's a new system like an STO or a new type of IPO model where we can get earlier access to retail investors?
Yeah, I don't, that's thus far. So look, let me just give you my impression.
Mm-hmm.
My impression is that if you have sort of passed the muster of the quality process that we see it at CDL, which is just basically 9 months of intense performance.
Yeah, kamikaze goal,
you come out of that with a solid, looks like a stable business model. The idea seems to be proven, etc. You can raise those funds. It used to be the case in Canada. It was like really hard. Now
it's getting easier.
With that network, it's getting
totally.
So you can do that. The ones that don't raise, it's usually a signal that they shouldn't be raising. They can't get that ones. So I don't see the constraint to the retail thing as the problem.
Mm-hmm.
I think the problem is getting the companies up to speed so that they are investable. And I think that's a huge challenge. And certainly a challenge with the companies we have that are very science-based, that sometimes it's like a 4-year time horizon by the time you get regulatory approval for something or whatever it is. But there seems to be a bit more patience for that now. So I don't know if we need to unlock more funds necessarily, for that funding. Maybe I'm not wrong, but that's the impression I get.
Yeah, like I'm going perspective as there's a lot of really good small SMBs and lifestyle businesses in Canada, globally, not just Canada. These aren't the unicorns. They're really good cash flow businesses.
Right.
Extremely well. And a lot of people use the products on a day-to-day basis.
Yes.
This is just behind closed doors, talking with these people using the products. If the opportunity did arise, they would take a position for the upside. It would help. The incentives align.
So you think, oh no, okay. So I mean that may be true. I haven't seen that. I don't get to see that. So that might be true. There may be this sort of unlocked things that could scale, but we haven't. That it's just the opportunity isn't there, the match isn't there, or people are happy doing what they're doing, and no one's taking it to the next level. That could well be.
Yeah, because whenever everyone talks about startup, they talk about unicorns.
Right.
I'll put that aside in that basket.
But let me just say, what retail investors aren't going to get you the answer to that, and the reason is because the other thing you get from the right sort of investors is it comes with that boatload of advice.
Yeah, it comes with the network knowledge. Yeah, totally.
And I mean, retail investors, I don't know. Do they? It doesn't have that.
No, like the reason why I bring this up is there is a massive long tail of amazing businesses that'll do like a couple of $1 million to 10 million.
Right.
Massive long tail. And you have entrepreneurs where the premiums aren't that sexy of these businesses.
Right.
Maybe 2x.
Yeah.
So they ponder, wait, should I sell my business for 2x, but then where am I going to get cash flow of this business anywhere else? I'm not going to sell it for 2x.
Right.
The premium's too low.
Yeah.
It's not in a sexy industry. No one's going to give me my 10x, whatever. Right. Okay.
Right.
So it's like, I'm not really getting a payday as an entrepreneur. I might be taking like $150K dividend for the rest of my life.
But that's what we get from moving all this out of Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
The things that are the unsexy businesses, pretty darn interesting. And that's another thing that we like to see. I like to see these ones, that look like they are, it used to be said to come up and said, oh, well, that's a loser category, and that used to be it. But now people are getting more open to that.
Yes.
Because it was a loser category because everybody's saying it's a loser category, so it got going. But people are working out how to make the case. Now, if you can prove where the money is, there's that. And so I think moving out of the mindset of geographies and across different countries would hopefully do that.
Mm-hmm. Is there any last final things that we should kind of talk about to get across to people?
I don't know. We've been pretty far-ranging, so it's been pretty good. I'd love people to read the book.
Please do. It's a fantastic book.
I'd like policymakers to read the book as well.
Yeah, it's a light read, which is great. It's organized beautifully. Like I went through it last night. It's fantastic.
It's excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we've covered it all. Covered stuff. There's other things we can. There's each bit of there could be drilled down for some period of time. We didn't even talk about the downside of technology and all of that sort of stuff. Also sitting there in the book and how to think about that. So
that'll be part 2.
Another future time. We do worry about that quite a bit. So yeah.
Cool. Well, Joshua, thank you so much for coming on the show. Guys, please go check out the book, buy it. I'll leave a link below in the show notes. Joshua, once again, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Wish you all the best.